every fantasy relevant tight end for week 14, ranked in tiers, starting at the top, and he is on his own yet again. Trey McBride absolutely breaking fantasy this year at the tight end position. There's not much more I can really say other than Trey McBride, an absolute superstar, averaging 3.5 fantasy points more than any other tight end at the moment. Just absolute stud.
Yeah, like his 17-game pace will put him on target for 167 targets, which would be a record at the tight end position. 125 receptions, which will be a record at the tight end position, and 1,245 yards, which would be a record. Sorry, it'll be the 11th all time. Like, it's ludicrous what we're kind of seeing from Trey McBride right now. He had 6 touchdowns in his career coming into this year, and now he's at 8. Going up against the Rams defense that's allowed the 9th most tight end fantasy points. They've allowed 49 or more yards in the last, in 5 games to the tight end position this year. So plenty of faith in Trey McBride. Like, Kyler Murray is not getting back on the field anytime soon. And Trey McBride, great year for elite tight end.
Absolutely. And in the A tier, we do have Brock Bowers and Tyler Warren. We talked last week about Tyler Warren being a little bit of a tough run. He's not broken 12 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 weeks. My issue is that it feels like a lot of Tyler Warren needs to be manufactured touches. I don't feel he's a functional part of this passing offense, which is a little bit weird because it is very RPO heavy. It is, very linked to that run game. Do you think that Tyler Warren could potentially get back to that form that we did see prior to kind of week 7, where it felt like he was putting up double-digit points every single week?
I'm definitely still struggling with him. This one kind of became tight end 3 by default ahead of some of the guys that we're going to get to. Because, yes, he got the touchdown last week, but he's been held below 50 yards in 3 of his last 4 games, and he's below 30 yards in 2 of those last 4 games. It was his first touchdown in his last 5 games. Like, you zoom out, and he's tight end 7 in points per game. So it kind of goes, well, why are we ranking him this high? And since week 8, he's tight end 10 below Colston Loveland. We've never ranked Colston Loveland this high. But the Jags are second in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. They've allowed 7 touchdowns to the tight end position, which I think ranks second most. So when you put all that back into it and you expect this kind of high-scoring week from the Jags and the Colts, then, yeah, it does become one of those situations where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to hold him up here. But there's just enough of a little knock on his armor at the minute where when I open my rankings and I start doing them, I don't expect Tyler Warren to be high, but then matchups for other guys end up sort of like defaulting him there.
Yeah, I mean, he was tight end 3 for both of us. And as you said, for me, it's almost like I just couldn't find anyone else to put there. No George Kittle this week, Travis Kelce with a tough matchup, and nobody else you feel hugely confident about. So It's kind of like, yeah, I've got to rank him here, but I don't particularly feel happy about it. Before we move into the B tier, though, if you've made it this far into the video, you want to get to the juicy bits, hit the subscribe button and you can get these videos pushed into your feed every single week. In the B tier, we do have Travis Kelce, Jake Ferguson, and Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange, so good to get him back on the field. A little bit shocked to see him ranked all the way up here in the B tier. But is this he's ranked this high by default, or do you think he's earned his spot as our tight end 6 this week?
Yeah, it's a tough week at the tight end position. Travis Kelce going up against the Texans, who've allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points, and then Jake Ferguson is in a more desirable matchup potentially against the Lions, but they haven't given up many fantasy points to the tight end position anyway. So by the time we get down to tight end 6, Brenton Strange, I'm just looking for a guy who's consistently involved. And Brenton Strange has finished in the top 7 in weekly tight ends, scoring in 3 of his 6 healthy games this year. The Colts, they've allowed the 6th most fantasy points to the tight end position. They've allowed 4 tight end touchdowns in the last 7 games. And they've allowed over 65 yards to opposing tight end combined rooms in 7 games this year. It's not a position they've done terribly well against. So I think that this is going to be a game where Trevor Lawrence is looking to get the ball out nice and quickly to avoid, the pressures that Lou Anarumo dials up. And I think that bodes well for Brenton Strange.
Yeah, we talked about it in the wide receiver video with Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas as well. Liam Cohen wants guys that can go over the middle, and that's the area of the field he's looking to attack in that kind of play action, link it to the run game. And that's where Brenton Strange has been feasting. So hopefully it could be a good week for him this week. In the C tier, we do have Carl Pitch, Juwan Johnson, Mark Andrews, Harold Fanning, and Zach Ertz. We're talking about how disgusting tight end is this week, how difficult it was to rank, guys. Zach Ertz is fresh off a 13 target game. Is there an argument that he should be pushed up a little bit just based purely on volume?
Yeah, as we were speaking there and talking about it, I was kind of thinking ahead to this ranking already and thinking perhaps this is the one with the chance to pop. I mean, it was the most targets he's had in a game since 2021. Which kind of seems absurd. Going up against the Vikings, who haven't been elite against the tight end position, they've allowed the 14th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the position, even though they are a top 10 defense in EPA allowed. I guess part of the trepidation is like not knowing, do we get Marcus Mariota? Do we get Jaden Daniels? Does it really matter? I mean, the Vikings, they play the most too high safety looks in the league, and that's very much their identity. Zach Ertz does see a bump in yards per out run to 1.82, up from 1.41, his average against kind of all coverages. So maybe this does favor him a little bit, like the other players that get bumper Debo, and Terry McLaurin does see a significant dip. So maybe this is that kind of like checking down passes 10 yards deep all throughout, and Zach Ertz can live in volume again. But it's just, for a player who's just not giving you much after the catch, it's always a little tricky with Zach Ertz.
Yeah, these are the players I'm always scared of because they're so volume reliant, because they're not giving you much touchdown equity. They're not giving you anything after the catch, that if for whatever reason that volume isn't there, you're left up the creek without anything, shall we say. But before we move into the D tier, though, if you are agonizing over that start-sit decision and you're not quite sure who to put in your lineup, dive in the comments below. Tom and I will give you our opinion, our answer, and make sure you nail that start-sit decision. In the D tier, we do have Dalton Schultz, Oronde Gadsden, and Colston Loveland. We've been talking about how hard it is to rank guys this week. Oronde Gadsden was supposed to be that man. He established himself week 6 to 9 as a top tier fantasy weapon, but hasn't broken 6.5 fantasy points in the last 3 matchups. Are we just concerned about the offensive tackles, him potentially having to stay in to block some more, the reemergence of Keenan Allen in the target pecking order, or is it just that this offense isn't as good as it was during those heady heights of the middle of the season?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of all of those things, really. Like the Chargers still want to be a team who are playing faster than we're normally used to for a Greg Roman offense, but things just haven't kind of kept going for Gadsden, and it definitely is partly because he's coming off the field more over recent weeks. Like, he's not scored more than 6 PPR points in each of his last 3. Like, it's really notably dropped. Like weeks 6 to 9, he was tight end 4. Weeks 10 to 13, tight end 37. Like, if you start him now, you are very much taking on a huge amount of risk. Going up against the Eagles, who will have 6th fewest fantasy points to the tight end position, it's not like this is a good matchup either. The Eagles have allowed touchdowns to the tight end position in their last 2 games, but before that, they'd only allowed 1 all season. So I don't think that there's a scenario where I'd be starting Gadsden this week if I'm trying to get my way into the playoffs.
Also in this tier, we do have Colston Loveland. Look, I was a huge Colston Loveland believer coming into the season. I said in the Dynasty video a couple of weeks ago, I've got him ranked ahead of Tyler Warren in my Dynasty ranks right now. But Cole Kmet doesn't seem to be disappearing, and he's keeping Colston Loveland's snap share reduced. It was down at 65% of routes last week. Is it just that he's not getting enough on the field to feel confident? But if you needed a dart throw, is Loveland the kind of player that you could throw in there, maybe in a matchup where you might not be a favorite and you need a little bit more upside?
Yeah, it's tricky because when Cole Kmet is on the field, typically it's more running plays, and when Loveland's on the field, it's more passing plays, which is great. But it's like we need him to stay on the field. We need him to be out there for the play action plays and like to be able to do just enough in that range where he's not taken off the field. Now, the one thing I'll point to it when we talked about the Bears in a couple of videos is Green Bay play the third most zone coverage of any team. Now, Caleb's not particularly good against zone coverage, but there are two players on the Bears who really pop against zone coverage, and that is Colston Loveland. Like, he has a 0.96 yards per route run against man, but against zone, it's 2.16. It's him and Luther Burden. They are the two players on the Bears who really pop against zone coverage. Now, you could say, okay, well, they play less snaps, so it's a smaller sample size, but these numbers are fairly consistent. Like, they've had good rates across the season against zone coverage. And I think it's more one which I'd be willing to do in DFS this week and take a little shot at punting a wide receiver position or a tight end position with one of those players. But I don't think I want to write them off for this week.
And then in the E tier, we do have Dallas Goedert, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Cade Otton, Isaiah Likely, Colby Parkinson, and AJ Barner. Darren Waller came back from IR, entered lots of lineups, and struggled. I thought he looked athletic. I thought he looked good. Obviously, you'd expect, an upper body injury shouldn't impact him too much. But we didn't really see the target volume we'd like at 15% targets per route run. Do you think we can get a bit more upside this week, or is it just Dolphins are looking elsewhere now?
I don't know. I mean, like, to your point, JJ Zacharyson pointed out that Darren Waller's not been above a 15.4% target share all year. So even the games where they've looked to him, and they definitely do look to him and they are scheming stuff, it's not been crazy volume, and the touchdowns are kind of buoyed it. Like last week, they were still using Greg Dulcich a bit. Yes, they had Darren Waller out there running more routes out wide and in the slot than anyone except for like Jalen Waddle and Malik Washington. But I think there's still a huge amount of risk involved with playing Darren Waller. Now, the Jets have allowed the 11th most schedule adjusted fantasy points to the tight end position. We know their defense is a little bit beaten up. We know that like the Dolphins offense can be creative enough that if they really want to design a play, that there's a good chance of it paying off. And Darren Waller seems to be getting those kind of design looks. But again, this just isn't one which I'd do outside DFS.
If you're that desperate, I think, to me, there's a player that's on the field more and potentially going to see more touchdown next week that I'd like to start than someone like Darren Waller. But as you said, he has that boom potential. So I understand it in a DFS scenario matchup. But that is it. Tight end rankings for the week finished. If you're looking for other rankings, make sure you check out these other positional videos we've published this week. And of course, hit the thumbs up, hype, and subscribe on your way out.